So the suffrage movement is known for its civil disobedience, but actually in South Australia there wasn't a lot because it was so early on in the campaign for women's rights in the world. In South Australia, the politicians were open to debate. It was something that they could have conversations about. Civil disobedience wasn't really needed to get their point across. The 1894 petition was done by the Women's Suffrage League and also collected by volunteers from the Women's Christian Temperance Union. So they ended up collecting 11,600 signatures from men and women, and it was thousands of sheets of paper which they stuck together to be a document that was around 400 feet long. They rolled it up, tied it with gold ribbon, which was the colour of the Women's Suffrage League, and then one of the politicians presented it in Parliament. Men were also involved in the campaign for suffrage in South Australia. They were involved as members of the council of the Women's Suffrage League. They were also campaigners. Many men signed the petition for adult suffrage. And of course, in order to pass the legislation that gave women the vote, we needed politicians who were all men. So it was important to have the support of a number of men in South Australian society, which luckily the women did. So there are a couple of other significant factors about the legislation that let women vote. It also let women stand for Parliament. Women didn't actually campaign for the right to stand for Parliament. It was a clause that was removed by a particular politician who was actually anti-suffrage as a way of discouraging others to pass the bill in its entirety. But this completely backfired. It was a huge miscalculation and it was passed anyway. So women got more rights than what they had actually campaigned for. It's hard to choose. As a proud feminist, there's just so many women in history to choose from. But as a war historian, I can't go past the women of the French Resistance who risked their lives to save not just vulnerable people, but also the way of life. In terms of suffrage, Muriel Matters, who was born in South Australia, came of age when the suffrage was being debated in South Australia and then continued the campaign around Australia and over even into England.